for he was scheduled to undergo a routine outpatient medical procedure at 11 in the morning, which was still hours away. Other than the desire for coffee, the only thing that was making him feel any pressure to get out of bed was, curiously, a mild awareness that all of this extra sleeping was going to make it harder for him to have his afternoon nap. This happened every day at 2 or 2:30. He had been doing it religiously for about a decade. When he had taken up the practice, he had wondered if it was age-related, since the oldsters in his family were known for nodding off in church pews, on porch swings, or even behind the wheel. But he could remember being 18 years old, driving all over the western United States and Canada in various beat-up vehicles, and being overtaken every afternoon by a need for sleep so intense that it was almost painful. He'd always tried to fight it off, or else simply avoided driving at that time of day. The only things that had really changed since then were that he was richer, so he could have a private office with a yoga mat and a pillow in the corner, and he was wiser, so he knew better than to fight the mid-afternoon lull. By closing the door, silencing his electronics, unrolling the mat, lying down, and letting sleep take him for 20 minutes, he was able to refresh himself to a degree that would then keep him working alertly for several hours more. The amount of time spent asleep didn't really matter. He had decided that the key to it all, the one thing that determined whether the nap would actually refresh him, was the breaking of the thread of consciousness, that moment when he ceased to think in a coherent, sequential, self-aware way and went adrift. Often this was connected with a jolt of an arm or a leg as he stepped over the threshold from conscious thinking into a dream where he was obliged to reach out and catch a ball or open a door or something. If the jolt didn't wake him up, then it meant he had snipped the thread of consciousness, and that the nap had thereby achieved its only real purpose. Even if he woke up 10 seconds later, he would be as refreshed, possibly more so, as if he'd slumbered deeply for an hour. He had studied the jolt. On those increasingly rare occasions when he slept with a woman, he would sometimes will himself to stay awake as she fell into slumber, listening to her breathing and feeling her body go soft against his until, just at the moment when she drifted away, she would convulsively move a limb. His business activities, he was the founder and chairman of a large video game company, sometimes involved flying in a private jet to the Isle of Man, 8 time zones away, where a longtime business associate, an independently wealthy writer, dwelled in a renovated castle. The writer would put him up in a bedchamber in one of the towers, a round room decorated with medieval bric-a-brac and warmed by burning wood and a fireplace built into the wall. The bed was a 4-poster with a heavy canopy. A couple of years ago, after climbing into that bed and lying there sleepless for a while, Richard, for that was Dodge's real name, had finally drifted off and fallen into a nightmare involving a very dangerous and unpleasant character he had tangled with some years earlier. He had awakened to the hallucinatory awareness that this man was standing next to his bed, looking down at him, which was impossible since the man was dead. But Richard had been in a half-dreaming state where logic did not hold sway, and all he knew was what he saw. He tried to sit up. Nothing happened. He tried to raise his arms. They did not move even the tiniest amount. He tried to draw breath and scream, but his body did not respond to the command from his brain. He was perfectly helpless, lacking even a bound captive's power to struggle against his bonds. All he could do was experience the terror of it, and the horror of his complete lack of agency, until somehow he drowsed off again. Moments later he had awoken with a start and sat up convulsively. His body worked again. He threw off the heavy duvet and swung his feet off the bed, turning to face the dying fire a few feet away. No one else was in the chamber. The massive fortress-style door was still bolted. The nightmare impression, which had been so convincing a minute ago, now seemed ridiculous. Lying back down experimentally, he looked up and saw that the lamp on his bedside table was casting a firelight shadow onto the canopy above him, and that the shadow moved about as the fire flickered and the logs settled. He must have half opened his eyes.